Start the stream. I do it a little bit early. It's not exactly 10 o'clock my time yet. 800 UTC. We're a few seconds ahead. A perfect opportunity to have a sip of coffee and just breathe. And okay, hi, I'm Daniel. This is July 1st, 2020. I did a curl release 7.71.1 just hours ago. So what did we do this time? Yeah, it was only a week since the previous one, and I was hoping that we would do a full month until, sorry, not a month, a full release cycle. That's actually 8 weeks until the next release, but we didn't manage to do that. So here we are again, just a week later. Yeah, so what you can see here on the screen is my release blog post 7.71.1. Very complicated version number to pronounce. So join the Twitch chat, ask me anything if you have any questions or comments or just want to say something. So here's my blog post about the release. So basically we did the 7.71.0 last week, and it contained a bunch of things. We had 136 bug fixes, and some of them weren't properly tested. I think it's a fair assessment to say. And a few of them were annoying, but in particular one was bad enough to warrant this extra patch release in a short period of time, so that people won't get too hurt or get in pain too much. So not a lot of not any changes here. So it's 7 days since the previous release. We did 18 bug fixes by 16 contributors and 7 authors, and we got 8 new contributors and 2 new authors in this short period of time. So the primary bug that caused me to really decide that yes, we need to fix this sooner rather than later, and I mean actually do a patch release and not wait the full release cycle until we fix, was this initial thing I mentioned in my blog post. But so in the previous release we introduced a whole range of new options to curl to the API call curl easy setup. So the primary function call to libcurl will you ask for set specific options for a transfer, and one of the options is you specify a certificate, the client certificate for a coming transfer, and as a blob that is in memory, not as a file. So, and that's was a new feature, but it turned out that we had missed to properly check that when we in the internal logic when we do connection reuse, so we wouldn't check for the blob certificate properly, which was a pretty bad bug. So it could make applications to reuse connections wrongly, for connections they should be able to reuse when they use client certificates. So we acted immediately and we put together a fix this release. But we also had a few other regressions and things that we messed up, mostly I messed up in the previous release. So for example, I talked about it in the previous in the release announcement for when I modified a lot of internal string and buffer management in curl, so that we now have a common module in curl called dynbuf, dynamic buffer, for all the handling of dynamic buffers and how to reallocate and grow them and so on, since that's a common, not problem, but a challenge for C programs. And I then replaced a lot of code with this new model of doing things in a new API, internal API, so they're not exposed really. But when doing so, I inadvertently modified some behavior. So in particular, the function, which is a public function, curl easy escape, which well, it's it's URL encodes a string, right? But if you pass it a zero length string, as in nothing, no bytes at all, just nothing, it would return null while it previously returned a zero string. And that was so modified behavior, and it caused applications to go wrong. It actually introduced a bug in the curl tool as well. So we got bug reports, and that was really annoying. So of course I fixed the problem immediately, but it was a good thing to get that fix out the door as well. So, and before even we had decided to do this patch release, so basically hurry out this fix in a week, I also merged two other bug fixes that they weren't really in a hurry, but we had them pending because we had been working on them. And for example, this very subtle bug that has been around for a while. HTTP2 has been around for a while, and if you do an HTTP2 application and you accept pushed streams, pushed streams being basically streams from the server offers to the client without the client having asked for them. And if you then in your curl using program would ask, hey, what's the effective URL of this stream, that it would give you the wrong URL. I fixed that, and also I fixed this. This was another regression that came with my buffer the remodel thing. So if you would use for example, an HTTP proxy with a zero length proxy password. Some users do that, username and a blank password. It would do the wrong thing because it would send the password nil within parentheses instead. Silly mistake. But again, also show that we didn't have any test case for that particular setup. And in most of these cases, now we have test cases. After I've fixed these regressions, I've added test cases for them. So hopefully it'll be harder to do the same mistakes in the future, at least. I did, well, I call it a bug fix, but it's not maybe another bug fix. I had a little informal poll on Twitter the other day. I got almost 1,000 respondents on the question, what do you call a C string, or what is a C string terminated by? Because in a lot of curl documentation I think I started it calling it zero terminated string, because I think it's a 0 byte. But it turns out that almost everyone think it should be called null terminated. My personal opinion has always been that null sounds like a pointer, and it's not a pointer terminated, it's a byte. But I've realized that I'm wrong and everyone else is right, and now I made a huge replacement. I think all documentation and all code that previously used something called zero terminated now calls it null terminated. So hopefully now our documentation is more in line with existing documentation. For example, all the strcpy on other mon pages and everything, they all call it null terminated. So we do too now. I'm just going to have to slowly adapt to this and accept it myself, because null terminated. Null dash terminated even in most cases. So what did I mean? I didn't do more. Yeah, it turned out that we don't support control codes in credentials, similar to the blank password, but this is actually a more long-standing bug. This isn't a regression. We didn't support, for example, new line in a password or username when using HTTP, there's really no good reason for in the HTTP case. So I fixed it, so now it works. Someone found out if you would pass in a password with new line, then do a redirect, blah blah blah, it would fail. Now it works. But this concerns HTTP because most protocols can't do new lines in usernames and passwords and so on, because they send the username and passwords in text fields basically. So I had to do this special HTTP adjustment. I imagine that this is a really niche use case. I really hope that most people don't use new lines and other control codes, tabs or whatever, in usernames and passwords. So one of the fine changes we tried to do, or I merged in the previous release, another regression, was that someone fixed so that we wouldn't have to use. Oh, this is complicated. So, long story short, we have an API function in libcurl called curl multi-wait, which waits for a lot of activities in parallel, for a lot of transfers and a lot of things, and you can also abort that, and it is done by using a sort of socket pair emulation code. So every multi-handle would then have this simulated socket pair, and in Windows you can actually do it better than doing the simulated socket pair. You could then save up sockets by doing it using WinSock events somehow. And it turned out that it was a buggy implementation, so people found out that this caused serious performance issues on Windows. It actually makes very, very slow transfers on Windows, because in some situations you won't notice when there's activity on the socket, but it'll just time out instead, and then it'll do it. So basically, depending on what your timeout values are, you will get the full timeout instead of acting on activity, which in some cases, so the bug report from yesterday, he made it 28 times faster when we fixed it, which is a lot. So yeah, that was really silly, and again shows that we didn't have enough and proper test cases for that scenario either, and we better do that before we try to land that fix again. I know that the guy is working on fixing it, so there will be another take, I suppose, for the next release. But now we have I think we have some pretty decent test case, so we could always go back to that example and rerun that at least, and make sure that 28 times slower is maybe not okay. And funny enough, well, more of an accident than anything else, when exactly in this little period from the previous release and in this week until I did this release this morning, NGTCP2 modified their API, and they're in a alpha version or whatever. We run against their latest Git branch, the master branch, all the time. So we've come to expect and realize that this is how we do things. So they changed the API a few days ago. It broke the curl build to use using NGTCP2. That's HB3 then. So the good thing there is that we could adjust our code and make sure that we run with the latest NGTCP2 again. So it was only broken for a few days, and now you can again build with the latest NGTCP2. So someone asked in the chat how we make a sorry, I should have more coffee. So how do we write a test case to make sure it doesn't run 28 times slower? Well, actually, I think it's not that hard, because if we just analyze exactly what made it slow, I think it was because it didn't trigger on some activities, but it had to time out instead in the function call, so we could probably just do a more extreme timeout value there for a few seconds and do that call 3 times. It should, be more or less instant. Does it take more than a second? We know that it's still wrong, or something like that. Yesterday I did a webinar and talked about curl testing and curl CI and everything, and someone asked me if we're doing repeated performance tests or things like that. Do we run things to detect performance, regressions? What if we add something that makes curl go slower suddenly, and how do we notice that? And the answer then is we don't notice that, unfortunately. This is something we discussed before, and we should probably continue discussing it, and I should probably do something that could at least potentially detect this sort of thing. It's really hard to do performance tests in like that and detect regressions because running things on servers and machines, it always depends on a lot of different situations, like what else is running, what's the network situation, blah blah blah. How do you actually detect a tiny change in performance? And if that tiny change goes on for a long time, maybe suddenly it turns out to be a big change, but it was never any big change, just many small ones. So it's difficult. But I'm really open for suggestions, or if anyone has good ideas there or want to work on this, it would be awesome. And funnily enough, so I mentioned that NGTCP2 modified their API, so they broke the HTTP3 build with that backend. So we have the other backend then, Quiche, which also is it's our second HTTP3 backend, and that also broke this week. But it broke for a completely different reason. It broke because Boring SSL updated on, I think it was June 20. Well, and again, Boring SSL, they update all the time, right? So we build our builds with the master branch from Boring SSL as well. And I discovered the other day that all our builds with Boring SSL also failed. And why is that? And it turned out that we couldn't link with a particular function call. So I had to check that up, and I reported the bug to David in Boring SSL, and basically pointed out that, hey, you forgot to update this thing properly. They landed their fix, I think, yesterday or so, and now we're back on track. So now we can build with Quiche for HTTP3 as well. So both HTTP3 backends are now fine again. So that was good. So right now HTTP3 works perfectly with both backends with the latest kernel. So pretty good. And those were the primary bugs we had. And hello there, yes, in chat. So we had some other, we fixed another build issue with embed TLS and a few other things. I cleaned up some examples and I did some spelling fixes and so on. So yeah, we managed to clean up a few things. And we do these, I repeatedly mentioned our release cycle. We do releases every 8 weeks, right? And now we suddenly lost a week because we had to do a patch release. So now we're only 7 weeks left until the next release, and we're gonna keep it like that. So we're going to do then basically 3 weeks of features now, then 4 weeks of bug fixes. If nothing else is terribly wrong and we have to do another patch release, but still, that's our new take on this. So the next release date is still stuck in the calendar. It's August 19. I'm pretty sure we will merge features, so it'll be 7.72.0 if we don't mess up. If I haven't messed up anything more. I'm pretty sure there are more regressions because these regressions came pretty quickly, and bam, 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 a series of regressions, and then I say, wait, let's release. It feels like maybe we haven't seen all the regressions yet, and but maybe at least we got the worst ones. So I'm crossing my fingers. I don't want to do another patch release. I think they hurt in my soul. So let's not do any more patch releases. So we're going to aim at August 19 then. What else is there to say? I don't know. What do you say in the chat? What else is there to say? As usual, the web page has been updated, so it says 7.71.1. We haven't got any new. The script hasn't found any updated packages yet, and I don't think we have any. Let me check. It's always interesting to see when the first bug reports fly in on the new release. I mean, there's always a bad sign when we get the bugs within minutes or hours from the announcement. I think I did the first announcement like maybe 2 hours ago, but we haven't got any new bug report. This is the top one is that performance thing I talked about. Well, this user noticed it on SFTP. It's possible to see it, I think, with pretty much all protocols. Yeah, and then there are other bugs, of course. 38 open issues. Some of them probably can be closed. Some of them are certainly still there to fix. So yeah, if you're bored, you can always join in, grab a issue, and work on it. So we have 22 open pull requests as well. So this is the top one is the remake of that WinSock event thing that caused a regression in the previous release. So that's the new take on the fix there. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things to to work on. Some of those are mine, I think. Yeah, I have 6 open pull requests. We'll see how it goes with those. And if you didn't well, I also tweeted about my fun experiences with Stack Overflow yesterday on Twitter. That was fun. I answered a 5-year-old question on Stack Overflow only to get it downvoted immediately because I didn't understand curl. Oh well. I'm going to call this a stream. Yeah, I realized that I'm doing this stream usually like this in my Euro morning, which is pretty anti, I guess, American time zone wise. But it's so convenient for me since I do the release. When I do releases on Wednesdays like this, I pretty much start my morning when I start my work and to do the release, and then it's pretty convenient to do my like this stream also in the morning to get this sort of off my table for the day, and then get started on fixing bugs again and merging things into the. Maybe I should do one of these release streams in the afternoon as well sometime. Usually 7 p.m. is a pretty good time, my time zone wise, for the American time zones as well. That's also why I usually do my webinars things in my evenings, to adjust for that. Anyway, I'm gonna call it a stream and just leave it like this. A little bit shorter this time because there were only 18 bug fixes. Not a lot more to say unless anyone has anything to add to everything. I'm going to try to... What was I going with this? I'm gonna add more test cases. There's going to be more of everything to make sure that I'm really gonna make an effort to try to make sure that we don't do regressions of this kind again. But again, I am not sure I can promise you that. If you go to this dashboard, you can see graphs of days between releases, and then this graph is not updated with the current release yet, so we can see that the 7 release median time between releases, yeah, it's going to be up here, but again we're going to do a dip down here, so yeah, the ideal median time is of course 56 days because that's 8 weeks, and that's what we're aiming for. Hey, you're not switching to Swedish in the chat, right? Too many Swedes to keep up the language. So if I'm going to stream my bug fixing, sure I can do that. I don't know what kind of bug fixes I'm going to work on next. In general, it's hard to stream just random bug fixing and fiddling with things. It's better to have more focused work areas because it makes me more focused and makes it a better stream and a better funner thing. But okay, let me say like this then. If you have a particular bug you want fixed, bring it on and I could work on it live on the stream. But let me do like this. I'm going to cancel. I'm going to stop this stream and say this is the release stream of 771.1, and then I'm going to... What am I going to work on? I'm going to have to look into what I'm going to do next. Okay. That's fun. Let's switch to a development stream.